Okay, hello everyone. How you guys doing? My name is Mark. This is Why I Hate the World, What's Happening. Starting exactly at 11 today. Thank you all for joining if you're out there. Today we have an extra super special episode, after school special episode of Why I Hate the World, where we're talking about the white supremacist myths, specifically those around a meme called the 1350 meme. Right. So, what exactly is this, the 1350 meme? Well, first, before we jump into it, let's take a look at where we're at with our current piece. Getting kind of close to the end here. I haven't done any work on it since the last stream, but you can kind of see we've got most of the sort of base color value changes in there. And what we need to do is start putting in some shadows and highlights, and then also got to do something with that mouth. That mouth is just like, you know, too flat. You know what I mean? Anyway, so let me just eat a piece of cheese here. Hang on a second. Okay, so what exactly are we talking about? Right. So, way back in 2015, somebody posted on Reddit in the subreddit called Shit That Reddit Says. Right. If you guys remember that subreddit, I think they're still around. Basically, it was just kind of a thing where you would get sort of like progressives and like far left kind of SJW type people, you know, who would basically just post stuff whenever somebody was saying something extremely racist or sexist or homophobic or transphobic, that kind of thing. And this subreddit really pissed off the MAGA type people. They really didn't like shit that Reddit says. And, because it was like a progressive sort of SJW subreddit, and they would also kick out all the MAGA chuds and shit like that, right? Excuse me. So, yeah, that was basically the sub had a reputation for being, very far left in its politics, and very much in favor of things like, identity politics and stuff like that, right? And um, somebody posted this. It was this sentence here. Despite making up only 13% of the population, blacks make up 52% of crimes, right? Now, if you were around back then on Reddit or even just on the internet in general, around, the I'd say like maybe the late Obama administration, right around there, up until around, the time Trump got really popular and elected and stuff, you've no doubt seen these memes being pushed around, right? And I just want to kind of show you because the whole 1350 thing has been posted and reposted so many times that it's become a meme in and of itself. Right. So let me just kind of share a few of these. Let me turn on my laptop window. There we go. Here is one that combines this little bit of white supremacist horribleness with my least favorite fucking thing in the entire world, the Minions. I've never actually seen any of these Minion movies. I kind of refuse to because they're annoying as fuck. And it seems like old ladies and shit just kind of like are obsessed with these things. I don't know why. Anyway, perfect example of one of these memes here. Excuse me, I'm like really hungry, so I'm just gonna like eat while we stream here. I know that's usually bad and people don't like it when streamers eat, but fucking I don't care. Yeah, here's another one. This one came from, this is actually on Reddit, 1350 mathematics. Let me just make that a little, let's just put that in the center. There we go. Oh, did I just copy that? I didn't mean to copy that. That's weird. Anyway, no matter how I calculate it, 13% of the population commits 50% of the crime. Just to kind of show you who posts stuff like this, let's zoom in a little bit on the let's zoom in a little bit on the comments there, just so that let's make that a little bigger so that we can read. Whoa, that was weird. It shouldn't have done that. We can read this comment. Um, First off, this was posted by a guy named MAGA Patriot. So you can see here the people that are spreading this stuff. Here we go. 6.5% mostly men, truth over facts. And here's this, because it always interests me to read it's not just the memes, it's not just the posts, it's always the people that comment on them too. Always interest me because it gives to me it kind of indicates the attitude of the audience for shit like this, right? Because if you post something racist or wrong or homophobic or sexist or whatever, and people reject it, then that's kind of a good sign, in my opinion. That means, oh, okay, well, then this attitude isn't as prevalent as everybody would think. But, then again, these types of things, there are echo chambers. We have to be aware of that, right? Maybe this guy's only posting it in subreddits where people agree with it. But anyway, I thought that this comment here by Mr. Clomaggio was kind of telling. Numbers and statistics are foreign concepts to libtards, unless, of course, they are being lazily contorted to fit their agenda. Today, they skip advanced math in favor of gender studies. Remember, facts don't matter when you're morally right, according to our child, Congresswoman AOC. The answer to all problems is always more taxes. Fortunately, minorities are starting to wake up to the fact that they've been conned by the Dems for decades now. I just like how this guy was able to read into this stupid racist meme. He was able to read all of this stuff into that. He was able to read in, you know, uh, education, right? Gender studies. He was able to throw in a little bit of an insult to Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. You know, he was able to like link in taxes with this as well. This guy just was able to just fold in every single idiotic, dumb shit, like conservative chud, like wet dream talking point into like one comment. Like this comment here just sort of encapsulates like everything wrong with the right wing in this country, according to me. I just thought that was interesting. I wanted to share this with you guys. One more screenshot. This one is of Theresa May dancing. I know this because I wrote it down. So you can kind of see these memes have been spread around. It's to the point where it's like become, all you have to do is just write the words 1350 and then everybody, people know what you're talking about. It's sort of like those, let's turn this shit off here for a second. Do I have any more after this? Okay, there's one more. Yeah, this was from Skyrim, actually. Right? See, all you got to do is just put, see, you notice how this guy put 90, right? Like, before, they were saying like 1350%, and now it's been elevated to 90%. So that's another thing that's has no fucking basis in reality, right? Now let's turn that shit off. Okay, and let's go back to our artwork here. Let me just get back to arrange my window back to how it should be. Give me 1 second, folks. Sorry about that. So anyway, where does this shit come from, right? Well, no doubt you've probably seen this little bit of copy pasta, right? Like, because basically what this is, it's I guess, you would call it propaganda, racist propaganda, right? And basically what it means when you say 1350, they're referring the 13 refers to, of course, the percentage of the population in the United States, which is made up of black people, African Americans, right? And the 52, sometimes they'll say 50, sometimes they'll say 52, right? Whatever, 52%, 53%. You saw the last meme we looked at said 90%. That's supposed to be the amount of crime committed by uh, black people in the United States, right? Which is um, the thing about this, right, is that it would be, incorrect to claim that black people don't commit more crime as a demographic in the United States, because they do, right? That would just be, it would not be right for us to try to claim that. Okay. But the thing is, there's a huge caveat with this, right? Um, these statistics are not all what they're cracked up to be exactly, right? It's a lot more complicated than just saying, putting it in a sentence like this. And it's because basically the stat is essentially crafted in such a way as to basically create fear. That's what this stat is all about. Okay. You can kind of bend statistics around um pretty much, many different ways, right? Why is this not is this shit working? Oh, I have the wrong color. All right. I thought it was that color. Damn it. There we go. So, yeah. So I want to what I want to do is just sort of examine where this came from, what it actually means, and if there is any actual basis to it, right? Which, you know, it is essentially, in my opinion, just propaganda. But, let's look at the evidence a little bit, right? Let's examine the claims that these people make. Because, it's not as cut and dry as that stat makes it sound. That stat makes it sound like, hey, if there were no black people in the country, 90% of the crime would disappear. And that's not the case at all, right? So, this little bit of copy pasta or whatever you call it originally came from Stormfront. For those of you out there who keep track, um, Stormfront is, of course, the sort of premier white supremacist website on the internet. It's certainly one of the oldest, if not the oldest. Um, I actually did a stream about 3 months ago all about the history of online white supremacism and where it came from and stuff like that. And Stormfront, I think Stormfront was founded in like 1998 or some shit. Anyway, it's one of the old ones, right? One of the old school things. And you've no doubt probably seen, you know, way back in the day, people spreading these types of crime stats, right? And what these are, they're essentially it comes from stats taken from the FBI and then presented in such a way to basically um, demonize black people, to make them seem like they're, the cause of all of society's ills, right? And also presents it in such a way to make white people look like not only that white people don't commit crime, but that white people are the victims of crime, specifically being targeted by black people, right? That's what usually you get because this is what these things are for. It's basically propaganda, and the pattern would go like this: you'd be on Reddit, you'd be in our politics or something, back then. They don't, the our politics now usually just kicks all these people immediately, but once in a while somebody would try to like post some shit like this, right? And it would get a discussion going, and then people would jump in and start talking, about crime stuff, and eventually the conversation would turn to how everybody hates black people, and that's what it was about. It was a way to demonize black people. It was a way to spread hate. It was a way to I guess, you know, spread their to kind of evangel. Well, what's the correct word? I guess is to you know, recruit. I guess that would be the correct word. to try to recruit people online. And because that's kind of what the whole point is behind like these types of things. You get the discussion going, you see the people who aren't like having the visceral like reaction against it. You reach out to those guys later, and then maybe you start talking about if you find out that they don't like black people, maybe you start talking about Jews or something. Maybe you start talking about the Jewish question. Maybe you start talking about illegal immigration, something like that. And then before you know it, the goal is to like now you've recruited this guy into your sphere or whatever. You can get him to join your group, and then ultimately spread hate and of course get money from them too. There's also a very large component in like these types of recruitment drives is to ultimately get money from people. You can never really like it's maybe a secondary concern, but it's definitely there. The idea of like, yeah, now you can like join my group or whatever and make donations to me, right? That's certainly there. The grifting element is certainly an element in these types of like online recruitment, white supremacist recruitment deals, right? Anyway, um, the thing about statistics is that it's all about the way it's interpreted, right? You could take a stat on anything and kind of turn it around a little in order to make it say something that you don't exactly, which is not exactly the truth. It's the way that it sounds, right? So, for example, this stat, when you hear it, it says 13% of the population, but 52% of the crime, right? Not exactly the truth. This is not 50% of the crime. It's 50% of the arrests is what, or 52% of people arrested, right? And it's not for violent crime or crime in general. It's specifically for murder, right? This is what this was. And what this comes from is from uh, an FBI report that was released in 2013, right? So I've got the table here. Let me just copy that, right? And we're going to be opening this up in a minute, but I'll put it down in the chat for you guys. Let's paste that. Pentazoid 111. Yes, 50% is the amount of arrests. Exactly. You know, exactly. Sorry, I didn't see your comment there. Um, right. So that's what this is from. It's from that specific year as well. And these are the FBI crime in the U.S. Stat tables. They're tables that basically break down arrests for various crimes according to like race, race and gender, and then it also looks at the victims of certain crimes and stuff like that, right? So arrests are not the same thing as convictions, right? It just means these were the people that were arrested for this. And it is true that, for certain types of crimes, it seems like more African Americans, more black people are arrested than people of other races, right? But, you got to think about like, what does that actually mean? Okay, so first off, you say, okay, well, this demographic is only 13% of the population, right? But they're overrepresented when it comes to these types of crimes, right? Like, what exactly, you gotta think like that's what it actually means. They're overrepresented. It doesn't mean that they're causing 52% of the crimes, right? That just means that they have been caught and arrested more for this type of crime than anything else. So you can't really say that it's not exactly the same thing as saying black people cause half of all the murders, or or even, when they say 90%, the word like 90% isn't even in that table, right? So what are we looking at exactly? Let me go ahead and just open that up. Let's see here. I need to arrange some things around before we can open this. Let's go FBI. This page doesn't exist. What? No, fuck you. I know it's there. Hang on a second, folks. Because I went through this entire fucking thing And let's see, here we go. Yes, it is definitely there. Okay, I just copied it down wrong. So here's the actual, let me open up my window here. Let's turn on the laptop window. Here's the thing we're actually looking at here, right? This is the crime in the United States from 2013, right? And I actually have another one of these from 2019, so we can kind of compare stuff. I'll copy that. I'll put that down in the chat for you guys as well. But we can only have one on the screen at a time. So let's paste that there. So what I just pasted is the 2019 tables, and then this right here is the 2013 tables, right? So first off, they use 2013 because 2013 has the largest numbers for black people committing crime, right? And if you look at, say, the other tables from like 2010, 2011, 2012, 2009, right around there, what you'll see is that it fluctuates. Sometimes it's a few points higher, sometimes it's a few points lower, right? 2013 seemed to be the one that around that time had the largest number of black people committing murders. So that's why they use it. That's the first thing, right? So it's kind of bullshit. But what we're looking at here is these tables. So you see total arrests, right? And then what it is this one, murder and non-negligent manslaughter. And then you can see right here, this is the number for African Americans, right? I did not mean to go over like that. Okay. So that's what it is, 52.2, right? And then if you look at the rest of these, you can see things like rape, robbery, blah, 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 blah. It adds up. Okay. That's where they're getting these numbers from. All right. Let me see here. So hang on, I lost my place. Right. So I want to give you an example. Here's an example of the kind of pasta that somebody would post, right? This is from Reddit, of course, and let me just go ahead and put this down in the chat as well for you guys. Paste that. There we go. So this is the kind of thing. This was what, 7 years ago? Fuck, has it been that long? 7 years ago? Geez, so this is 2015 is when this was posted, right? And people would post this. Here it is, right? By a guy named Obese Snake, right? And I guess this was during one of the BLM riots or something, you know. And they would, so basically, here's how the pattern would go. Somebody would find a news event or something where a black person committed a crime, right? And post it on a place like Reddit or social media or something. It is a favorite pastime of white supremacists to go and find videos, specifically video, but just also news stories or anything of anything that makes black people look bad. And they sort of like to post stories like that around. It's like crack for these people because what they do is they find the video, it'll be like black people fighting on World Star Hip Hop or some shit, and they'll or it'll be like a video of like a guy, holding up a liquor store or doing something shitty, some criminal doing something shitty, and they'll post it on like Reddit or Facebook or something. And it's like the favorite pastime of like white supremacists to all just pile on and start talking shit about it. And there's tons and tons of subreddits where even this happens today. This used to be a really big problem on Reddit specifically back in the day, right? Um, excuse me. And there were all these different subs. There was one called Coontown for crying out loud. There was a bunch of subs like that. There was one called oh god, what the fuck? There was one I actually used to post in because it wasn't bad like that, and then these people fucking took it over. God, I can't remember what it was called, but there was a whole bunch of subs like that. Where these people would come in and they would just like hate post all fucking day. And then inevitably some asshole would post this kind of thing, right? And they would just list all of these dumbass stats. And so you notice the first one is the 53-12%, I guess it was 53-12, but nowadays it's 50-13 because, time and increase in populations and shit. Right. But you can see there's a whole bunch of claims here, and then they put the stats, they put the I guess they cite where they get it from, right? The source. And you can see it's like always this same one, Crime in America 2013 database. It's always the same one over and over and over. And it's because that was the one that had like the worst stats at the time for black people. And it's funny if you look at the one from 2019, it's actually slightly lower and slightly more white people than in 2013, committed more murders and more violent crimes and stuff. Right. So, but if you just look at this, if you just look at, the claim, it says because, it would say like 50% of crimes, violent crimes committed by black people, right? It's funny how these things evolve. Hey, Lusa Hedgehog, how you doing, man? Yeah, no problem, man. Thank you for joining. Um, let's take a look at that table, though. Okay, so we're back at the table, and you'll notice that number 52%. Yeah, okay, it's high, right? It's higher than the percentage of African Americans in the country, right? But that doesn't mean that 52% of all the murders in the country are committed by black people. It means that of the people arrested for murder, 52% of them were black, right? What does it also say about the rest of these, right? Here, 45% of, the people arrested were white people. So does that mean that, you're almost as likely to be murdered by a white person than a black person? Is that what they're trying to say? See, it's kind of what this is how you can bend stats around, right? Let's look at some of the other ones here. Rape, 66% versus 31%, right? There is also on this list here, they talk about rape. You know, Basically, it says a little bit down in here that, where is it? Here it goes. Despite being 7% of the population, only 12% of the male population, black males commit one in every three rapes, right? When you hear that, one in every three rapes, that makes it sound horrible. That makes it sound like, oh, I'm in danger. If I see a black guy on the street, it's like he's likely to rape me or whatever, right? Then you look at the table, the actual table, yeah, okay, it's high, but it's what they're not saying here. Look at that. 66.2%, of people arrested for rape were white. So does that mean that two out of every three rapes were committed by white people? Right? There's ways of moving these things around. That's how a stat can be manipulated like that. I could turn that around and say, I could easily turn that around and say, well, two out of every three rapes were committed by a white person, right? It's all in the way you present it. That's what I'm trying. Basically my point is a stat is all in the way you present it, and it's the way they present it is to make you afraid of black people, right? Let's look at some of these other ones here. Here's one that really caught my eye: arson. Look at that. 23% of black people commit arson. 74% of arrests were white people. So it's like, wow, should I be afraid that white people are going to burn my house down? I mean, that's what, 7 out of 10, right? The chances of my house being burned down by a white person, are they way higher than chances of my house being burned down by a black person? Or do these stats not have anything to do with that whatsoever? You know, See, that's the thing. It's like, no, these stats don't actually say anything about the chances of a particular perpetrator being of a certain race. All they say is that the people who were arrested were of this race. That's what it says. But these little bits of copy paste, kind of switch that around a little bit, right? So, what else we got here? A couple of others I thought were interesting. Motor vehicle theft, way more white people arrested for stealing cars than black people, right? Aggravated assault was another one, 62.9. See, that's another thing that the white supremacists will always tell you. They'll always say that black people are violent and all that stuff, and you know, And it's like, oh, they're just like living in the ghettos and shit like this, and you get your ass kicked, blah 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 blah, and that they target white people, right? And then you look at the actual, if we're to believe, right, if we were to take the same route that these guys take, and if we were to think that these crime stats actually like had something to do with the chances of a certain perpetrator being of a certain race, right? If we were to go with that, then like the same shit that they cite as evidence says that you're more likely to be aggravated assaulted by a white person, right? That's like that's what I mean. If that's what if we're supposed to believe, if we believe the argument that these people put forward when they post these stats like that, then that's what the stats say, right? Personally, and I just want to make it clear that I don't actually believe that argument. I don't think these stats really say much about what any given perpetrator, what the race of any given perpetrator is more likely to be. That doesn't say that's no, that's not all. Remember, these are just arrests. They're not convictions, right? They're not, crimes that were committed that, charges weren't filed or an arrest wasn't made. So it's only one unit of measurement, right? If you wanted to get a much better, you'd have to look at other sources of data in order to get a more rounded, picture of race and crime in the United States, right? So yeah, I mean, violent crime even, it's high. That's the thing. Now, here's the thing about all this, right? I'm not trying to deny that it isn't high for black people, right? Because it's to say that would just simply not be true. It is high, okay? And, but we'll talk about the reasons why a little later, right? So just things to keep in mind, here's another one, like when I'm talking about different sources. This is the criminal victimization from the report for 2019 from the Department of Justice, right? Let me just put this down in the chat for you guys as well. Paste that there. Let's see. Lewis the Hedgehog. Keep in mind, law enforcement and prosecutors always love to go after low-hanging fruit. That's true. That's also true as well. So, you know, um, it's easier, like, to convict people that don't have money in order to defend themselves. Right. And we'll talk about that a little later too when we get into like a little bit, because I'm going to talk a little bit about the socioeconomic causes behind some of this, right? So anyway, this is actually a pretty good little source of all this stuff too. If you go down to say page 17 here, let's see, let's scroll down, scroll down, scroll down. Plus these numbers are from 2019, they're a little more recent. But let's look at here. This is the let's zoom in. Right. Table 13, percent and number of violent incidents by total population and victim and offender demographic characteristics, right? So this is not just arrests, this is incidents. So this is counting anything that was reported, not just people who were arrested, but, things that were reported, and an arrest wasn't made, charges weren't filed, or they never found the guy. That's another thing too. It's like, well, I reported, yeah, I got my ass beat and they stole my phone. What do he look like? Oh, well, he was, black guy, 5'7", blah 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 blah. That this is where it goes. Okay. And if you look at this, we're looking at violent incidents. So this is just violent incidents. This includes murder. It includes assaults, somebody slapping you in the face because you don't wear a mask in a fucking store or whatever the fuck, right? This includes all of this stuff, right? And you can see, when it comes down to percent of violent incidents, the offenders, huh, that's not 52%, is it? You know? So when you kind of factor it all together, I mean, yes, it's higher than the percentage of the population, right? But once again, no one's denying that. No one's denying that there isn't a problem with crime in the African American community. There obviously is, right? But that's not the same number as what we saw on the copy paste, is it? It seems to be half of that number, right? And just looking at this, you know, actually it seems like half of the crimes are committed by white people. is what it seems like. I mean, this is what the Bureau of Justice is saying, right? So it seems to be a little more evened out there when you're not, this is just another example of how stats can be manipulated, right? How you can take data, and the thing about it is that as a culture, we're sort of we're sort of trained to take statistics at face value. And I don't know how this is in the rest of the world, but in the United States, that's how they kind of teach you when you're in school and stuff. Just the facts, ma'am, right? This is how you're sort of taught to make arguments in this way. Go cite an expert someplace, put down a stat, and then build your argument around it, right? They don't really teach us in the United States to take a more wider view of a subject like that. You know, I mean, I don't know. Maybe they do now. When I was in school, they didn't. Right. So anyway, yeah, this is some interesting shit here that I'll leave for you guys to read on your own. Did I put that down in the? I did, right? Okay, good. So anyway, I'm gonna go back to the. We can turn that off. I'm gonna go back to our copy paste here because some of these are kind of interesting, and it's not just this one here, but these are kind of interesting. But I just want to kind of illustrate a little bit about how these things can be twisted around, right? This entire thing is an interesting read too if you're into stuff like this because it's really kind of filled with a lot of bullshit. Some of these links are actually broken because this is from like seven years ago and stuff. Some of these stats here are like from like the 70s, right? So it's like, yeah. But for example, like this one here, young black men kill 14 times more than white men. Source Time magazine. Like this one is like the source in this Time magazine article is actually broken, but let's open that up. Here's the actual article that they go to, right? And it's funny because this person that wrote this is actually a black person. The person that wrote this is black, right? But then if you go to the stat here, 14 times more than young white man, this doesn't even open. It's like broken, this link here. Right? So, yeah. But you notice where it comes from? It comes from topconservativenews.com. So, okay, yeah, that's a totally unbiased source. Right? Anyway, let's go ahead and turn that off. But this is I did put the link to this, so if you want to go through some of these. The truth when it comes to violent crime, however, when it comes to, like I'm talking about specifically this one right here, right? The truth when it comes to violent crime, however, is that overwhelmingly the perpetrator and the victim will be of the same race. Like and that is just sort of across the board, right? Why is that? It's because you most likely, when somebody commits crime, they do it against the people in the community they live with, right? And in the United States, more often than not, neighborhoods are segregated, right? Now, it's not, the law that segregates things. It's just that's how it just sort of shakes out. And there's reasons for that. Things like, historical redlining and that kind of thing. But the biggest reason why neighborhoods tend to be segregated in the United States is because of socioeconomic factors. That being, black people have less familial wealth that is like, inheritable wealth, wealth in their families. Like they have less of that by far than white people or even people of other races. I mean, like Latinos are a distant second. White people, of course, are the first, and then you have like, Asians and stuff, second, and then Latinos, and then black people are at the very bottom. And it's because they've been, over the last 150 years or so, they've been shut out of a lot of the economic benefits, the economic growth of the 20th century. Like they kind of didn't really benefit from that very much for lots of different reasons. And then you had systemic racism, practices like redlining. It's like, oh, even if you had the money, for example, They wouldn't banks wouldn't give you a loan to buy a house in certain neighborhoods because those were neighborhoods were white, and so you just ended up living, if you're a black person, you ended up living in a certain part of town, and that just happened to be the part of town where property values are really low and stuff like that. Less economic activity, more likely to be arrested for things, for like more likely to get, harsher sentences for crimes like the exact same crime that a white person would commit. This is all true shit, and these are all things that contribute to disenfranchisement when it comes to voting. All of these things contribute to black people having just more wealth as a I mean, less wealth, sorry, as a demographic than other races. Specifically white people as well, like way less. It's something like, your as your average white family has something like 8 times the amount of familial wealth, inheritable wealth, right? Usually in the form of like your house or something you know, um, it's something like 8 times more than the average black family. It's not even close, right? And so that is the reason why victims tend to be of the same race. You especially when it comes to things like random street crime, right? You don't I mean, maybe when it comes to things like robbery, you don't, you go rob the rich people, but you're more likely to rob someone in your own community than you are like a rich white guy that lives 2 hours away, right? You're more likely to if you're gonna break into someone's house to rip off their fucking PS5 or something and to sell it for crack or whatever, you're more likely to do that to the guy that lives 2 blocks away than to the guy that lives 2 hours away. And that's just true as well. Now, it is true that white people tend to be the victims of crime at a higher rate than all other races, right? That's also true. Why is that? Right? Well, it's because the reason why is because there are far more white people in the country than black people, than any other race. Like even now there's a lot of you get all these stories about the white genocide and shit. That's a thing that like all of the fucking like white supremacist guys and the racist assholes are always like fucking, are always like jizzing their pants over, right? The white genocide thing. And it's because like currently white people are on track to not be the vast majority anymore, but they'll still be the majority for like the next 50 years, and it'll just be like there'll be a plurality. So what's basically going on is that there's more immigration like from south of the border, and that's making the number of white people as a percentage not the majority. So how it's usually been in the past, like the white people would be like a overwhelming majority, like they'd be like 80% of the population and shit, and now they're going to be basically a plurality. So all of the other races combined will be more than white people, but as a plurality is like, the white portion is still larger than any other, right? Currently, as it is right now in the United States, there are roughly, I got it written down here, 41.99 million black people in the United States, right? There are currently 236.5 million white people, roughly, in the United States. So it's not even close. There are, that's what, fucking 7 times, right? 6 times the amount of, white people are in the country than the number of black people. So there is, it's not even close. So this stat right here, where they say young black men kill 14, times more than young white people, blah 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 blah, right? You know, it's like it's kind of meaningless. You know what I mean? It's like obviously more white people are going to be the victims, right? Like anyway. So anyhow, that's kind of bullshit. That was one I wanted to point out specifically. There was another one here, the one about robbery. I thought was a little misleading. Blacks commit 50% of all robbery, despite being only 12%. You notice how they always say this in every one of these little things here? They always add this. They always add this despite only being 12% of the population, right? Why do they say that, right? They say that because it makes it sound like it's larger than it actually is. Okay. That's what it is, right? It makes it sound like if this number here were 12, then everything would be okay, is what that's trying to do. It's basically planting in the reader an expectation, like an artificial inflation, and makes 56% sound larger than it actually is, right? According to this table, this is when we're looking at um, robbery, right? 56%. Yeah, it's pretty high, right? It's much higher than it should be. It's much higher than the percent of the population, right? But then you kind of break it down a little bit. What does robbery actually mean, right? Armed robbery? Yeah, maybe, right? You'll notice other categories of similar kinds of thievery is not half like that. You'll notice burglary, for example. White people commit way more burglary than black people. Larceny theft. White people commit way more than that. Motor vehicle theft, way fucking higher, right? Aggravated assault, way fucking higher. But, so why is this so high? Why is it, because that's the kind of robbery that happens in cities. That's why it's so high. So the majority of black people in the country live in cities, right? And we'll get to this in a little bit more. And it's like this is usually, when it comes to gangs and stuff like this is the type of crime that they engage in. They're more likely to hold up a liquor store to get a few $100s than to say break into somebody's house and like rob it. You know what I mean? Right? That kind of thing. Then burglary, then larceny theft. You know, than motor vehicle theft, than steal a car and send it to a chop shop. There no, it's more likely, you're more likely to do it at the end of a gun, and that's just the kind of crime that happens in cities. These other types of crime here, burglary, larceny, theft, motor vehicle, right? These other ones here, these are more likely to happen in suburbs. You're more likely to have somebody break into your house and rip you off in a suburb. And while you live in the city, you're more likely to just have a guy mug you on the street. And that's just how crime shakes out, right? Um, let's see, what else are we looking at here? A couple wanted to look at a few more of these. Where are we at? 11:48. Okay. Let's see. Blah 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 blah. Here's the one about rape that is super duper misleading, right? Where is it? Um, where's the fucking rape one? What the fuck? Male commit. Yeah, here we go. This third one here, right, where they're talking about how black people commit one in every three rapes, right? Remember, these stats don't actually say that. These are just people that are arrested for that, right? But this, if you were to listen to that though, if you were to actually take this at face value, kind of makes it sound like there's like armies of like rape gangs, of black rape gangs running around and kidnapping white women and stuff like that. And that image of the sort of black savage that is going to like, steal your woman, that goes all the way back to the Civil War. Right? We did a stream on that. We did a stream on the black brute stereotype, like about, I don't know, last year sometime. I can't remember the name of it. But yeah, when we were talking about like the history of it was the same stream where we talked about the history of basically Reconstruction and slavery, right? That's yeah, that goes all the way back, and all through the early 20th century. That was a big motivator, like sort of excuse that they gave for lynchings. You know, he raped a white woman, right? Real famous case, if you remember the case of Emmett Till from, I think it was what, 1954, I think. Emmett Till was a 15-year-old kid, goes into a department store where there's a white woman working, and apparently flirted with her. You know, the jury, it's still a little unclear about what actually happened, but apparently he flirted with a white woman and then maybe like, put his hand on her leg or something, and basically that got Emmett Till lynched, right? You know, but it was like just stuff like that. I mean, that kind of that stereotype of the black, the black brute is what that is. That's old as fucking, you know, it's like as old as like the country of the United States, right? I mean, that was even like one of the justifications they gave for slavery way back in the day too. That these were just savages, and we were actually the white people who were enslaving them were doing them a favor by giving them like civilization and shit. So kind of bullshit, right? And it's funny how how the more things change, the more they stay the same, right? But if you look at the actual rape, here we go. It's high, but like I was saying before, you know, this stat also says that 2 out of every 3 rapes is committed by a white person. So does that mean that we should be afraid of white people? Are there gangs of white people like running around kidnapping women, raping them, shit like that? Not really, right? So that's how these things can be, misinterpreted and misread and designed to make, that's how these little bits of propaganda, kind of are designed to make you spread, hate and fear, right? What else we got? Here we go. Here's a really good Vox article. Let me just open this. Uh, and I'll put this down. We're not going to read any of this, right? But I'll put this down in the chat for you guys too to check out later. Pretty good Vox article where it basically talks about, um, you know, the number of white on white murder in the United States, right? In 2011, apparently 83% of white victims were killed by white perpetrators, right? So does that make you think that every white person that you're gonna meet is like, gonna kill you? I mean, shit, they 83% of the murders of white people are from other white people, so should I be afraid of white people? Kind of that's it, the rationale, the logic there just doesn't make sense to me. Not if you think about it for half a second, right? Anyway, the rest of these are similar bullshit, of these stats. Lots of fucking like, baloney. They talk about cop killings and they talk about burglaries. Like, I really like this one here, right? Where they talk about arson. 1 in 3 commit, African Americans commit one in 3 burglaries, arson crimes, fraud crimes, and offenses against family, children. And they always throw this in there despite being only 12% of the population. They always throw that in there. And then you click the stats. I really liked this one because if you look at if you look at these, it's like the number of white people that commit these things is way higher. And then you get to arson. Arson is like all fucking white people. And it's funny how they say they list arson here like this is a thing that you should be afraid of black people for. And then you look at the actual stats and it's like, oh shit, 74% of person is fucking white people. It's like so even one of these stats where it's like it's overwhelmingly white people who are responsible for it. They still try to switch it around. You know what I mean? Like they still try to say like, oh, it's black people commit 1 in 3. See, and it's when you hear that, when you hear 1 in 3, that makes it sound gigantic. Like if you were to say, if someone were to come to you and say, oh, you have a 1 in 3 chance of catching cancer, you'd be afraid, right? That's what they're kind of playing on. They're playing on that bias that people have when they hear stats like that. You know, it's kind of bullshit, right? So let's turn this fucking shit off. I put that all in the chat for you guys. You can all check it out. Let's turn this shit off because it's making my fucking head hurt. And plus, I want to like draw because this is an art stream, right? Let's see. Let's look at some of the comments here. Well, I think I already read most of the comments. Yeah, keep in mind law enforcement and prosecutors always love to go after low-hanging fruit. Yeah, we already read that one. Okay. Cool. So, let's see. We're at 12 o'clock. Yeah, about halfway through. So, why is this, right? Well, why? Because it's true. Now, because like I said before, And I just want to repeat this over and over because there's always going to be some guy that comes in halfway through the stream that's going to accuse me of, um, of trying to deny the truth, right? And all this other stuff. And it's like, oh, you're just, you just hate white people or whatever. It's like, no, I don't hate white people. I'm fucking half white for crying out loud. My mom's white, right? I'm not gonna like hate white people. That's bullshit. But just wanted to kind of, emphasize that again, that I'm not trying to deny the facts, right? Because it would just be wrong to say that, there isn't a problem with crime in the black community, because there is, right? But I just wanted, we want to talk about why. Why are the reasons, right? Because, it is high. Some of these stats here are very high. 52% of the people arrested shouldn't be that many. It shouldn't be that many. There's already that's too many, right? Why is it like that? Well, the biggest reason that um, African Americans seem to be arrested more often for various types of crime, right? The biggest reason is because they live in cities, right? That's the number one reason. So let's show you this. This here is a map. I always love maps. They're very, very easy content to show off. Very easy, low effort content, you know. And let me see here. Let's turn on my thing one more time. Let me go back over here to OBS, turn on my laptop. Here is a map from Censuscope. I put that in the chat for you guys, basically showing the distribution of the African American population in the United States, right? It is very heavily concentrated down in the South, right? But it's not just there. You'll notice that it is basically any major population center. This is not like the rural South. These are the cities here. There's Miami down here, Los Angeles over there. There's DC, right? Fucking New Orleans, all these different places. So they're basically living in the South and in urban areas, and that's just where black people live, like around the country, right? Let's turn that off now. And let me just put everything back the way it was. Sorry, guys. I always have to juggle stuff. Maybe I need 4 monitors. That'll make this a lot easier. Then I can just turn one on. I don't even know if my computer can handle 4 monitors. Right. So, they live mainly in big cities, mainly in the South, and for reasons we kind of touched on already, have kind of been confined to the less affluent areas of these places historically, right? And, have been denied lots of opportunity, you know. So another thing you got to keep in mind is that these stats are always there to, they're always presented to show white people as victims. And we kind of went over that a little bit already. The reason why the white people are the victims of crime is because there's just way more white people, right? So you're more likely to, just in every everyday life, you're more likely to encounter a white person than a black person, right? If you were a gang member or a drug addict or something looking to rip somebody off, you're more likely to find a white victim, right? And here's the other thing, and I will even acknowledge this. There could be some racism in play there as well. That is definitely a thing. There could be definitely that could be part of it too. Someone who's a criminal doesn't want to prey on other black people. That could be a factor as well. We have no way of measuring that. I mean, I'm not going to deny that. I'm not going to deny that that ever happens because it does. You know, that is most definitely a thing. I just don't think it's as big of a problem or systemic. That's the thing. It's like individual kind of acts of racism. It's a lot different than systemic institutional racism, right? Individual acts of racism are a problem, obviously, you know, um, but they don't tend to. oppress entire demographics the same way. You know what I'm saying? So, but that could definitely though, I mean, I'm not going to deny it. That could definitely contribute to the types of victimization there, right? Wow, why is it doing that? Stop doing that. Okay. Anyway, so that's another thing. But yeah, getting in, but I think though we really can't underestimate the effect of institutional racism on crime. That you know, in the United States, we really cannot underestimate how much that contributed, right? Because it's true. It's true that, for example, there are far more black people in prison than proportionally than any other like demographic or race in the United States, right? Far, far more, you know. And the thing about that, so what are the reasons behind that, right? Well, the people that post these stats want are basically the way that they, these sort of copy these myths, these copy pastes and shit. The entire point, the reason why they do it is because they want you to think, like the point of the propaganda is that they want you to think it's because of genetics. It's because black people are just naturally criminals or whatever. They're primitive or whatever. They have lower IQs, all this other shit. That's what they want you to think. And the data just doesn't match that. It doesn't make any sense. You know, it's more, because there are only two reasons why anybody really does anything, right? It's either, there's nature or nurture. You know, that's what it is. And the thing is, there really hasn't been any evidence to show that nature is a cause of violent crime. You know, um, not really. You take someone whose father was a, you know, gang member, serial killer, or whatever, and you take their son, you give their son a good education and good opportunities, and he's not going to be a serial killer. Right? That's just how it works. It's been like that forever. It's, you know, anyone who tries to deny that is lying to you. Right. Now, I mean, the thing is, I'm not going to say that because there's multiple studies. You can find a study that'll say anything. You can find studies that say it's all genetic or it's all nurture or it's all IQ, blah, 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 whatever. I don't even believe in the whole fucking like race and IQ thing anyway. That's like complete bullshit too. You have these people talking about shit like the bell curve and stuff like that. You know, I don't even want to get into that shit right now because it's fucking total bullshit. Right. But I just think that, the systemic institutional racism really plays a much bigger part than, any of the other stuff, than any of the genetic components. I don't even think there is a genetic component to violent crime myself. But if there was, it seems to me that the way that now why would that be like institutional racism? Like why would that contribute to crime, right? Well, it's because when you kind of when people are oppressed and they figure they've got no way out of crushing poverty and systemic oppression like that, when they think their society has failed them, then they tend to act out. They tend to just not care, right? In general, when people feel like they don't have a stake in society, then they care less about the way that society goes, right? You kind of see this when people get disenfranchised with their votes. Oh, the election is rigged. I'm not going to vote anyway, right? How many of your conservative friends have said that recently? Right? Kind of a lot, haven't they, right? Well, imagine that, imagine for 4 generations, you know, like has it 4 or even like 5 or 6 generations since the 1860s? It's just been passed down in your family that, everything's rigged against you. Nothing you do is going to matter. And there's no way to improve your station because every time you try to improve yourself, somebody throws you in jail right? Or steals what you have and there's nothing you can do about it. Imagine that is sort of ingrained in your culture and you've been taught that since you were a small kid. And not only have you been taught it, but you've seen it happen, you know? Imagine that. Imagine you've seen like your entire community just like deteriorate because nobody can get any jobs because of systemic racism. Nobody can accrue any wealth because of institutional racism. Like, imagine you see that. You're not going to be very, I guess, invested in the way society is run or even what happens to your community. You're not going to give a shit. You'll be more likely to go out and just say, fuck it, I got to do what I need to do to survive. And criminal gangs and stuff like that prey on people like this, right? You know, everybody has to, we the society we live in, you know, requires you to work, requires you to have money, right? You can't get by without a job, right? You can't, I mean, if you ever want to own a house, then you need a certain amount of cash. You need to be able to pay bills and things like that. If you have your own apartment or whatever, you have to pay water bills and rent and insurance and all of this shit. And you're not going to be able to make these responsibilities when your ass is working at fucking Burger King, right? That's just how it goes. So imagine you're in that situation, right? That you've been fucked with your entire life. Every time a cop looks at you the wrong way, you get pulled over and fucking arrested or whatever. Try to find a job, and the only job you can get is like fucking sacking fries because that's all there is. That's all there is in your community, right? Can't even like move out of your community, even if you had the money to. Can't even do it, right? Then you see a guy saying, "Hey, well, I'll pay you $500 to just stand on this corner and tell me when a cop shows up. Don't say anything." What are you going to do? You're going to take the money. I'd take the money. You know why? Because fuck it. That's why. Right? I understand that completely. I would take it right off. I'd volunteer for that shit. Right? Oh, you're going to pay me to fucking like, you're going to pay me the money I need right now. And I don't have to like wear a paper hat and a fucking like, right? Like I would do that, so yeah, you would take the money too. You would engage in crime and do all of the things that you're afraid. Yeah, you would do it. You would do it as well if you thought that it was, you know, a way out, right? And criminals and cartels and shit like that, gangs, they prey on people like that, right? This is how they recruit people into their organizations and shit. It's a way out. And that's the other thing is that you'll get like gang members, for example, will sort of support each other, right? When the police won't. They'll do things like say, I remember reading a story once about how um, a woman had her door ripped off of her hinges, right? And in the project, she lived in a project. The door was ripped off of her hinges, and she was afraid, like, hey, someone's gonna come fucking steal from me and shit. And, while the landlord was slacking and getting someone to show up and fix her door for her son happened to be in a gang. He got a couple of his buddies to show up and stand guard. And it's like, so that way nobody would rip off his mom, right? And this is how people, so then people see this. They live in these communities and they go, well, hey, yeah, the gang, they deal drugs or whatever, right? But they're fucking helping me when the cops aren't, right? So who are you going to trust? So then, you know, somebody gets killed or whatever, and the police come around and start asking for witnesses and that kind of thing. Are you gonna like rat out the people that helped you? Hey, they fucking helped you, man. So then you're less likely to turn them in for crimes they commit. You're more likely to look the other way. It's like, okay, yeah, they deal drugs, right? But they keep the junkies off the street. They keep our neighborhood from getting fucked with. They keep people from breaking into the houses in our neighborhood. They keep people from getting stuck up. They get all the stick up kids out of like our neighborhood, shit like that. So you're more likely to, and that's how it works, right? This is how crime becomes systemic, right? We talk about systemic racism. No one ever talks about systemic crime. You know, this is how crime becomes a problem. Crime becomes systemic, right? And the thing is, if you lived there in that neighborhood, you'd do the same thing because there are basically variations of this same theme in pretty much every city in the United States, right? And not just black people, but all demographics, you know. I mean, where do you think the mafia came from? Right? Why do you think, like, for example, in Italian, American communities in the 20th century and shit, how did the mafia form? It's exactly what I just described, right? An oppressed community, in this case Italians, sticking together when the authorities didn't come through for them, and they had to work together. It just so happens the people who can enforce, who can look out for you and who can enforce, the rules and the norms and things are also the guys with the guns who tend to be involved in less savory practices. That's exactly what happens. This is why there's an Irish mafia, right? This is why there's a Jewish mafia, you know? You don't hear a lot about those guys, but they're out there. New York and shit, the Jewish mafia, right? This is why there's a Jamaican mafia. These people are all around. This is why there's and you'll notice in every country it follows the same pattern. The triads come from a historically, oppressed segment of the population, right? Fucking the Yakuza, same fucking thing, right? You know. So so that's one reason why. Yes, crime is systemic in the cities, right? And black people happen to live in cities. And that's just how the shit works out. Number one. Um, so another reason behind this though is it really does seem that in our country at least, the African Americans have it the worst. The black people have it the worst than the other, you know. And I don't want to like gatekeep crime and oppression and shit like that. I'm not trying to do that because, I'm sure anybody out there who's ever had a run-in with the cops can tell you, no, it's not about race, blah 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 blah, right? But I don't know, man. Certainly kind of seems to be that when you're black in the United States, you seem to be most definitely treated much differently by the police than white people, right? Than people of other races, even, right? That's anybody who denies that shit. Anybody who's denying that black people are not policed harder, they're not arrested more for bullshit crimes, that they're not the subject of police violence more often, or suspected more often, or arrested for things that white people wouldn't be arrested for. Anybody that's saying that shit is just like anybody who's denying that is, I got a bridge to sell you, right? I got a bridge and a jackalope farm and some furry trout and a bunch of NFTs that I want to sell you. Right? Because that shit's true. Those things happen. Don't try to deny that they happen. Okay. Black people in this country are 3.23 more times likely to be killed by police. Right. This comes from the God damn it, where's my mouse? There it is. This comes from the a study from the Harvard T.H. Chan School of Public Health. Let me just copy this. I'm not going to open this up, but I'll put it down in the link for you guys here. Paste that. You can read that on your own if you want. There's another study by the Stanford Policing Project talking about driving while black, right? Um, if you want to look that up too. Black people are 20 times more likely to be pulled over by cops than white people just for driving down the street, right? That's and then you look at like, well, hey, then they get arrested far often for crimes, and then you start thinking like, well, why? You know, Why are they arrested more often? Why are there far more arrests? We just looked at all those crime stats, right? And it's true, yeah, they are arrested for these crimes more often for things like rape and murder and burglary or and stuff like that. Not burglary, but robbery. Why is that? Well, maybe because they're being policed a little harder. Maybe because when you know, the police are out looking for somebody, the description is black male between the ages of 18 to 30, you know, 5'6" to 6'2" or something like that. They give like this generic like description that fits every single black person. Right? And then, these people get pulled over and arrested and stuff, and then it turns out they didn't do it, whatever. Remember those stats that we were looking at, they weren't convictions, they were just arrests, right? So yeah, maybe they get arrested way often more, but then we looked at the other ones that said the actual incidents a lot lower, you know. Things to just keep all this stuff in mind. I want to talk a little bit about black people being arrested for stupid things. Here's a story that just came out of this happened just a few days ago. Let me pause that. Let me turn on my monitor here. This is the director of the Black Panther, Brian Colger, who was arrested for attempting to withdraw his own money. Can I make this full screen? Yes, I can. Let's make this a little smaller, though, because I don't want to get my stream kicked. But yeah, this guy, he directed the Black Panther movie, right? A movie that made $1 billion. Here's him in a Bank of America trying to withdraw his own money from the bank.
Sir, do me a favor, man. Come this way. Put your hand behind your back. Put your hand behind your back.
Change it on my back. Got it. Got it. Got it. Got it. Is there any reason y'all doing this, bro?
Give me 1 second. Hold on.
Good job, guys. Good job, guys.
So, keep in mind, this is a world famous director, guy who made one of the highest grossing superhero movies of all time. I think it's like third in line behind Captain Marvel and Endgame, right? Something like that. It's like, Black Panther is nothing to laugh at. I mean, that movie brought in some bucks, and besides the fact that it was like really good, I mean, let's keep that in mind too. It was like Black Panther is one of the better like Marvel origin stories in my opinion. I think it's better than like say Shang-Chi for sure, or the Black Widow movie for sure. Like of the more recent ones, I'd even say it was better than the first Thor movie in my opinion. My favorite Marvel movies are the first Captain America, the first Doctor Strange, and then the first Black Panther in that order. Those are like my favorite origin stories from Marvel, right? So it's like way better than it's like really good. So this guy is not like just some thug. He's not. I mean, of course they probably not gonna know who he is on sight or whatever, but not a gang member, right? Not even just a normal guy. It's like he's withdrawing his money because he's rich. It's like a rich dude. So kind of shows that even if you're like anyway, well, let's watch the rest of this. Let's watch. It's only about like a minute long, so let's watch some more.
It's a problem. I need everybody's name.
They're writing all your
I need everybody's name. You know what I'm saying? And I need to find out who made that call in there.
Yeah.
Okay.
You know what I
It
mean?
came from the bank.
Yeah.
Came from the
I need
bank.
to find out who made the
That's
call.
fine. That's
yeah.
fine. You have all right to do so.
Yeah, I got.
But
Can I speak to a manager in an office somewhere? Have you ever considered doing
I'm
something
gonna
like that?
consider it now that y'all
Okay.
fucking drew guns on me.
Yeah.
I was trying to take money out. But up to this point, at every Bank of America I ever gone to in my entire fucking life, just never happened.
Gotcha.
You know what I'm saying?
I understand.
So y'all explaining y'all perspective, right?
Yeah.
Y'all the ones with guns and vests. You know what I'm saying?
See that? Walks in, didn't have a gun, didn't pass them a note or anything. Because you would think it's like, well, why would a bank call the police on you because they think you're robbing them, right? Usually you would have to give them an indication that you're robbing them of some way, right? Wouldn't you have to like give them a note or something? Wouldn't you have to like wave a gun in their face? Wouldn't you have to say, "Hey, put all the money in the bag" or something? Doesn't look like he did that here, right?
What's my perspective? What's my perspective?
I know you
At the bank, she never said it was a fucking problem, bro.
Yeah.
I said, hey, is that gonna be okay with you? She said, yeah. I put my own card in, put my own pin in. She asked to see my ID. I gave it to her.
Yeah.
And she goes in the back, and I'm waiting for the and then the people keep coming out. Hey, they taking care of you. They taking care of you. Everything's it's taking a little while. Next thing I hear fucking Glocks.
Yeah.
See, no indication that he wanted to rob them, right? Didn't say, didn't have a gun. I mean, you listen to the man's words there, right? He put his own card in, he put his PIN number in, right? He asked her if it was all right, all that stuff, right? Yet they call the cops on him. Why? If he were a white person, would they have done that? Let's turn this off. Let's turn this off here, right? If this were a white person, right, would they have called the police on him? Yes or no? Right? I don't think they would have. I don't think anybody out there, you know, believes that they would have if he were a white person, right? It's ridiculous. You know what they probably would have done is said, "Thank you for your business, sir. Oh, I notice you have a lot of money in the bank. Can I interest you in some of these investment products or whatever?" That's probably what would have happened if you were a white person going in and withdrawing. He withdrew $12,000, right? I mean, so yeah, that's just one example. Here's another one that I always like to. I'll put this down in the chat for you guys. I'm not going to open this, right? This is a story that I'm about to post here for you. Paste that about a college professor that way back in the day was arrested trying to break into his own house. His name was Henry Louis Gates, and he was a Harvard college professor, right? Another example, and if you open that up and you look at the guy doesn't look like a criminal. He doesn't look like he's a crackhead. He doesn't look like he's a gang member. He's not trying to steal anything from anybody, right? He looks just like a normal middle-aged dude, kind of balding a little bit, just looks like a guy that you would see anywhere, and got locked out of his house, right? And when it's your own house, it's like, okay, well, you can call a fucking locksmith and pay $300, or you can go around back and open a window. Right? So he decides it's his house. You are allowed to break into your own house. There's no law against that. Someone calls the cops on him and he gets fucking arrested. He shows his ID, shows that he lives there. They arrest him anyway. And this particular story got a little famous because it happened right after Barack Obama became president. And Obama had the audacity to make a comment on it. And the right wing lost their fucking minds. The right wing in this country just, completely fucking like, got the vapors over the president of the United States making a comment about a black man being arrested breaking into his own house. It's like, oh, how dare he, and all this other shit. Right. That was just I thought that shit was funny because it's the dumbest thing that like obviously there's a problem, you know. If a guy gets arrested breaking into his own house, there's a problem. Okay. Especially if the guy shows his ID, shows that he lives there, there's pictures of him on the fucking walls of the house. Obviously, the house is his. The cops, I actually like the idea that it's good. The cops should have come. Okay. That's great. Yeah. Because, that means they're responsive to crime, right? But at the same time, arrest? Why? Like, why the fuck did they arrest him? You know, is his house, on his driver's license, does the fucking address match? Yes, then it's his house. Let him go. What the fuck, Would they have arrested a white person for that, right? Probably not, you know? Here's another one. This seems to happen all the time. Another one, black man arrested in his own house. I'll just put this down here for you guys to open that up later if you want to. Let me just put that down in the chat for you. Just search, here's another example. It happened in Wisconsin. And this was just like, I think this year is when this happened, right? Basically what it was is that this guy didn't even break into his own house. This was in Wisconsin. He was just hanging out on his porch. He owns the house. He lives there. He decided to hang out on his porch and chill. I don't know what he was doing on his porch, but who cares? It's his porch. He could do what the fuck he wants, right? He could like go out on his porch dressed up in a ballerina costume and start dancing to like the fucking Nutcracker. It doesn't matter. That's what it is. That's what happens when it's your house. You get to do whatever you fucking want in it, right? You could uh you could dress up like a clown and like start doing the fucking Macarena and shit in your house, and that's, whatever, because it's yours, right? So yeah, it's his porch. His neighbors call the cops on him because apparently they didn't know he lived there for some reason. I don't know. Maybe that's a good idea to get to know your neighbors and shit. Cops come and arrest him on his own fucking porch. It's like, hey, I live here. Did they take 2 seconds to listen to him, to look at his ID and say, oh, you actually do live here? Okay, thank you. No, they arrest him. Why? You know, if he was white, would he have been arrested? Right? So that's, so when you hear some of this is an example. This is like institutional, so like a very easy, like highly visible example of the disparities in policing and institutional racism in the United States, right? Because when you try to list stats and shit, people, because you can always stats, like I've been saying this whole time, you can present them in different ways, right? And so people will try to twist stats around and stuff. But when you have a story, a news story about a guy getting busted in his own fucking house, that kind of illustrates it. And then the thing is, it's not just one. It's not like, oh, this happens like once in a while and shit. It happens all the fucking time. Just search for that. Search for black person arrested, own house, and you will get dozens and dozens and hundreds of hits because it just happens constantly, over and over and over and over. It happens constantly. Black people being arrested for stealing their own cars. That was another one I saw on YouTube not that long ago. Guy's car got stolen. He calls the police. He reports his car stolen. The police arrest him, supposedly for stealing the car, because the person who stole the car fit his description. Right? Even though like the description wasn't even like they weren't wearing the same clothes. It was like, oh, well, it was a black male between the ages of 25 to 40. Oh, here's one right here. Well, this is the guy that reported the fucking theft, you moron. Like, what the fuck are you doing? If you actually like, why would you call the police on yourself? It doesn't make any fucking sense. Like, I wish I should have saved that one because that one was like ridiculous. It was like basically a video where the police are questioning this dude and he's saying exactly that. It's like, why would I call you if I stole my own car? You know, you fucking idiots. Of course he doesn't say you fucking idiots, but you could tell he wanted to. Right? It's always a good idea to be polite to the police even when they are fucking idiots cuz they can shoot you and shit. Right? So, always a good idea to be polite and respectful even when they are completely 100% in the wrong, you know. Anyway, so that's kind of bullshit. That happens all the fucking time, right? Black people being arrested for shit that like, stupid fucking things that white people don't get arrested for, right? Um, Other things like say for example, black people getting, convicted at a higher rate. That happens, right? For crimes. Why? Why are black people convicted at a higher rate, right, than white people? It's mainly because of money. White people as a demographic usually have more money than black people. They can afford better lawyers, right? And the more money you have, the less likely you are to spend any significant amount of time in prison. That's just how it is. That's another example of systemic institutional racism in our society, right? The better defense you can afford, the less prison time you'll get. Doesn't mean that you won't get any prison time, but you'll get a much better deal because your lawyer, you can pay for the best defense. And this is just why in general rich people don't go to jail for shit that, at least not to the same extent for things that poor people do, right? Rich people generally, the more money you have, the less likely you are to spend more time in prison. You're more likely to get out sooner because look at Bill Cosby. Here's a perfect example. Bill Cosby's black too. You know, Bill Cosby had what was it, 60 women come out against him, right? Gets out on a fucking technicality. He obviously did it, right? Gets out on a technicality. Why? Because he's rich. If he wasn't rich, he'd be in jail, right? That's the same. Another one. Fucking that shit happens all the time. So yeah, that's kind of bullshit. Also, black people will be convicted, like arrested and convicted of things that white people will basically get a slap on the wrist for. That happens all the time too. A jury is more likely to convict a black person just in general, and that's also evidence of that's also evidence of racism, right? Which you would say institutional racism in that case, right? Um, Prosecutors are more likely to charge black people for crimes that they would let white people off for, right? Um, and then when it comes to like disparities in sentencing, that's something that happens as well. Black people get much harsher sentences, right? Some of that has to do with the way that laws are set up, right? So, for example, similar laws, like say if you have the law regarding sentencing for crack cocaine versus powder cocaine, black people are more likely to use crack cocaine, white people more likely to use powder cocaine, right? If you have the same amount of crack versus coke, you go to jail for far longer for like the same amount. It'll be 5 years versus 25 years, right? And that's true. That's, a perfect example. Versus, the thing is, crack cocaine and powder cocaine are essentially the same thing, like chemically. They're just one is way cheaper to produce because it's got like, it's designed for mass consumption. And that's why it's like more poor people more poor people do crack than they do coke, and it's because it's cheaper, and it was a drug designed for mass consumption versus cocaine is something that's expensive. I don't know how much coke is. I've never done coke. I will never do cocaine, but still, it's fucking expensive as hell. You can't, it's an expensive habit, put it that way, right? That's just a perfect example. Also, for the exact same crimes, black people will go to jail. They'll be more likely to be convicted and go to prison for the exact same crimes, right? To illustrate that, I want to show you the case of Pamela Moses. So here's another one. I will copy this, put this down in the chat for you guys too. Pamela Moses is someone who was convicted of a felony in what state was it? She was convicted in God, I'm not exactly sure, but it was down south someplace. It was in Memphis, Tennessee. That's where it was, right? This article that I just posted is actually, let me turn this on. Pretty interesting. It's worth a read if you're if you want to talk about this stuff. Basically, talks about several white people who got probation for voter fraud, and a black woman got 6 years for doing not even voter fraud. Here's the story of Pamela Moses, right? Let's turn that off. So basically, in the story, it talks about a guy named Bruce Bartman who signed up his mother to vote, who is dead, and actually two cases, his mother and his mother-in-law, both who are deceased, and then signed them up to vote, and then cast a vote for Donald Trump. as his deceased mother and mother-in-law, gets probation, does not serve any time in jail, right? Um, 5 years probation is what this guy got, right? Pamela Moses is this was a white guy named Bruce Bartman, right? Pamela Moses was convicted of a felony in Tennessee, and in Tennessee is one of those states where you permanently lose your right to vote. You have to petition in order to get it back. In order to get it back, you have to go through all kinds of hoops, right? And she wanted to get her right to vote back, so she petitioned the court, said, "Hey, have I met the criteria in order to be reenfranchised?" Right? Because there were certain things you had to do. You had to serve a certain amount of time. You had to pay off all of the fines. You had to make sure you had no outstanding warrants, blah, 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 blah. You had to make sure that all the court fines were paid. You got to do all this bullshit in order to vote again, right? And she wanted to see, hey, am I done with all that? Am I completed with this, right? And she went to her probation officer and asked him, have I met the criteria? Am I good? Her probation officer signed a certificate saying that yes, she met all of the criteria. It is safe to give her back her vote, her right to vote, right? Her probation officer made a mistake. Apparently, she didn't meet the criteria. She still had a few things outstanding that she needed to take care of before she was able to vote. But she didn't know that. She got the signed certificate from her probation officer saying that she could vote, so she went and registered to vote, right? Pamela Moses didn't actually cast a vote. She just went to register because her probation officer said she could. Her probation officer signed off on it. Goddamn, my voice. I need some water or something. Excuse me for a second, right? Sorry about that. And she got 6 years in prison for attempted voter fraud. Did not cast a vote. This was just trying to register to vote, right? One guy registers his dead mother and his dead mother-in-law, actually casts votes in both cases, gets 5 years probation, no jail time. Another person just tries to register to vote, gets permission from her parole officer to do so, right? Does all the right stuff, everything you're supposed to do, is told that she's able to go register, gets 6 years. What's wrong with this picture? Okay. Why? Why is it because she's a black woman and he's a white man? That's why. That's the reason why. There's no other reason that what's the reason? Why? Why does a white guy get 5 years probation and a black woman gets 6 years in jail for not even it's not even the same crime. It's like his crime was way worse. He actually committed a crime. She didn't actually vote. She didn't actually she just tried to register to vote. Gets thrown in prison. You know, this is systemic racism right here. This is systemic institutional racism. You know, that's what it is. I mean, look if you just go back to, the history of Jim Crow and all that, this is where all this shit comes from, right? It's all about keeping black people disenfranchised, right? Because when you disenfranchise somebody, that's the one of the major ways in which a community is able to control basically their own destiny, specifically their economic destiny. When someone doesn't have the right to vote in their own best interest, then they don't really have a say in the policies that get passed, the laws that get passed. They don't get a say in the way that money's spent. That's the real reason why that you know you have like Republicans like working really really hard to pass anti-voter registration laws and stuff like that, getting rid of drop boxes, that kind of thing. right? Because it controls the money, right? The legislature, like it controls how money's spent, how tax money's spent. The more money that's spent in your community, the better off that community is. And this is how it works, right? And this is really the reason why Republicans hate taxes so much. At least they claim to. In real life, Republicans don't hate taxes. They don't, what they hate is having to pay taxes themselves. They love spending money. Republicans love spending tax money, especially on themselves, especially on their friends, right? What they don't like is actually paying it. And what they want to do, this is a little bit of a sidetrack here, but this is what the real thing when you hear Republicans talking about taxes and how taxes sucks and tax and spend and all that shit. What they're really saying is we want to tax you and spend the money ourselves. Maybe we'll talk a little bit about that next week. If you look at Rick Scott's current proposal to basically raise taxes on poor people, this is what I'm talking about here. Maybe we'll make our next stream about taxation. Right. Anyway, but yeah, that's one of the big ways you keep basically a population down is by removing by disenfranchising them, by not allowing them to have a voice in the laws and the policies that affect their communities, and then also by passing laws that disproportionately put them in prison. Right. Let's see. We already talked about that because that's the truth. The truth is, when you're rich, you don't go to prison. You don't really have the same. It's not laws are not enforced the same way against you when you're rich. That's just, and then when you do go to prison, you end up going to fucking rich people prison. You know, you end up going to the prisons that have like fucking salad bars and like, right, and like and like fucking masseuses and tennis courts and shit. Right? Like seriously, that's if anything, this is another indicator of how just systemic the I guess what would you say like inequality is in our country. That's another indication right there, right? Okay, getting down to the biggest reason why these stats are so um you know I guess lopsided is because of poverty. And this is where it's all been kind of like everything that we've been talking about has been kind of leading up to poverty, right? And because it's true that the African American community in the United States has a big problem with poverty as a demographic, they are the poorest demographic by far, right? Um, Roughly 22% of African Americans live below the poverty line in the United States. By contrast, about 8% of white people live below the poverty line. Now, also keep in mind that the actual raw numbers are way different. You know, 8% of 242 million is way more than 22% of 40 million, right? So, as far as like the raw numbers of people who are poor, more white people are poor in the country than black people, but that's just because there's more of them. A much larger percentage of black people as a demographic are below the poverty line than white people, right? And it's because of all of the things that we were just been talking about. And this is ultimately what all of this is all about. Uh, this is basically the aim of systemic racism is to keep people poor, right? uh, over policing, right? Of things like redlining, economic racism, you know, um, stuff like that, right? Harsher prison sentences, that kind of thing. It's basically if you look at the pattern of what it all adds up to, it's essentially just a way of keeping people enslaved. You know, you can't, Jim Crow laws, all of that stuff, right? If you can't own the people directly. Like if you're not allowed to just own people as slaves anymore, the next best thing is to keep the population lower so that you can exploit them more. And this is what ends up happening. This is why, black people live in the places they live because they historically have not been able to move out of those places, right? You know, they've been denied the benefits of things like, for example, the GI Bill. Like that's another thing that, people don't really think about that. World War II happens, right? Then for 10, 15, 20 years after that, we have, unparalleled economic growth. A lot of that had to do with things like the GI Bill. A whole generation of soldiers came back after that war, went to college. Black people were kind of cut out of that, right? They didn't get that benefit. They were denied that shit, right? People who went and served in the country, in the war and went and fought for the United States and stuff, come back, find their white neighbors, get the house and the car and the picket fence, and they get shit. You know, they end up staying. Oh wow, I just fucked that up. Okay, there we go. Wrong layer. Sorry about that. You know, so it's like, yeah, it's like I was saying before, when you think you got no place to go, right? When you've got no alternative, no way to get a better job, right? And you got bills to pay, and you're not going to be able to do it fucking like, working in a drive-through and shit. What's your alternative? Your alternative is crime. Your alternative is, well, I got to make this money somehow or I'm going to get evicted. I got to make this money somehow or my kid's not going to be able to eat or they're not going to have shoes. They're going to take my kid away because I'm not able to provide for them. So what do I got to do here? Oh, well, I can sell drugs. Right? I can work for this guy over here. He's got a job for me, And it might start out small. It might just be something like pick up this package and deliver it over there, right? Might be something like that. Might just be like, okay, you just drive the car and just take us where we want to go. Don't say anything. Okay, just stand on this corner. You get like children being used as lookouts and stuff. That's a thing. Drug dealers will have like they'll have lookouts looking out for the cops, and it'll be like a 12-year-old kid or something. Then you go, okay, here's $100. Just stand on this corner, and when you see a cop, you know, give me a quick text, something like that, right? That's would you? I'd take the money. I'd take it if I lived there and I had no way of getting out, and I saw all my family and friends living in the same poverty kind of fucked up thing, crime all over the fucking place. Here comes an alternative. Here comes a way that I'm not a victim anymore, where I can actually do something about it. And yeah, well, maybe it's less than fucking savory, but what's your alternative? Your alternative is being a punk, right? That's your alternative. Your alternative is fucking like be a victim, right? And end up in prison. And then the way you look at it, it's like, well, I'm probably going to end up in jail anyway, so fuck it. I might as well do something that's going to earn me my stripes in there, right? This is the situation that we've created. That this is the situation that, you know, 200 years of systemic racism and oppression has created for this community of people, you know. And then you wonder why it's like, oh, then you get these fucking racist assholes posting stupid bullshit like this that all it does is spread hate. All it does is spread hate, make things worse. And, it's a real problem. This is one of the biggest problems I think that we have as a nation, you know, is this sort of systemic racism. One of the major fucking problems, like we're supposed to be, the United States, man, supposed to be the land of the free. They tell you this when you grow up here that we're the freest nation on earth and all you got to do is work really hard and you too can be super rich. Not exactly true. Not really true at all. And for some people, it's less true than other people. And that's just sort of how, like, that's the reality of the United States. And one thing you hear a lot from the right wing in this country is like, you know, if you're a leftist, if you're a progressive, you hate America. It's like, no, no, you don't hate. It's not wrong, or it's not anti-American, or it's not disparaging against your country in any way to want to improve your country. The way you improve stuff like this is that's the problem. The problem is that as a society, the United States as a society is in denial that this is even like an issue, that this even exists, right? You hear it all the time from the right wing in this country. All lives matter, right? Black people try to get a little bit of respect, saying, hey, cops are fucking killing us in, disproportionately. We're being policed disproportionately. We get sentenced more, blah, 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 blah. Right wing turns around, does the exact opposite. All lives matter, because we're in denial. We're in denial as our society is in denial that this is even a problem. And why? Because of systemic racism. So, anyway, folks, you know, the ultimate thing about this is that when you're the victim of these crimes, all of this shit flies right out the window. And that's the last little bit. That's the last thing I want to talk about when it comes to this propaganda. When you see this type of propaganda online, they're also targeting the victims of such crimes. They're saying, "Hey, you know, I got ripped off once. A guy mugged me once. A guy beat me up once. Oh, he happened to be black. Well, did you know that black people commit 50% of the crimes?" That's another way. That's another thing that they're targeting. They're trying to find the victims of such crimes so that they can basically recruit them. And it's another, that's why we should talk about these things. This is why we need to address these things and point it out, because if you are a victim of crime and the person happened to be black or whatever, you know, it can get a little emotional, and you're more likely to fall for shit like this, right? And it's like, no, you got to understand why these things happen. And, you know, the person's race of the criminal that fucking, victimized you, you know, it's not because he's genetically predisposed to committing crimes. Because that's ultimately their ultimate goal, is to instill that. This is why they post this shit. They want to instill that notion that it's like there's a genetic component to all this. And it's like, no, there's no proof of any of that. There's no proof of no correlation, you know, like as to the cause of violent crime has anything to do with race or genetics at all. Has everything to do with basically systemic ills in our society. So, anyway, folks, let's see. Any more comments before we end this? No comments. That's fine. We'll end a little bit early today. Let's see. Where are we at here? This is a touchy subject, and I fully expect many people to disagree with a lot of the things I've said, and that's fine. You can disagree all you want. It's cool. You know, this is what the internet is all about. We should be discussing these things, right? So let me know what you think, good or bad. Don't feel compelled to agree with me all the time just because I'm the guy streaming, you know. Anyway, gotta do my ending speech here, so let me see. Let me just go over here. And please, if you're watching, please like and subscribe, of course. Always got to say that. I should probably start saying that at the beginning of the streams, don't you think? That might be a good idea. Let's see here. Give me 1 second, guys. Just opening up all of my ending stuff so that I can talk about all of my different social medias and whatnot. Let's see. There we go. So if you like what I do and you want to give me some money, check me out on Etsy. This is my Etsy shop right here. I do prints and comics and things like that. Um, and so this goes directly to support me if you like it. These are all prints that I do, hand stained, sort of Lovecraft looking things. Here's a brand new one that I just put up like 2 weeks ago. So yeah, if you like what I do and you want to support me, support the channel, please consider buying something. If you want to see more of my artwork, I have a DeviantArt gallery here. All of the art that we do on the channel ends up on this gallery, and you can just download any of this for free. It's totally cool. So please check me out there. I also have a web comic. It's got ninjas and stuff in it. Why did my image not show up? Wow, that's bad. What the hell happened? Fuck. That sucks. Well, anyway, I do have a web comic here. Please check it out. I don't know what's going on with it. That's I paid these motherfuckers. Wait a minute. Refresh that. Let's do a random one. Connection's not private. What the fuck? I don't know why. I don't know what's up with my comics. It should be showing up here. Wow, the images are not there. Anyway, usually this is up. I'll just have to, I don't know what's happening there. Thanks fucking website. That's fucked up. Anyway, here's my other YouTube channel if you want to see me talk about toys and games and stuff like that. Appreciate that. And Shoma, what's up, dude? Thanks for joining. Appreciate it, man. Thank you so much. Anyway, there's all the rest of my stuff, so please check me out across all of my different social medias and things like that. I will also put this all down in the bottom of the, in a comment, as I always do. Anyway, thank you, Lewis Hedgehog, for joining. Thank you, and Shoma. Yeah, why didn't you tell me you were joining, man? Like, cool. Good to see you. I want to talk to you, dude. I'm moving in like 3 weeks, so not too far away. I'm actually moving a little closer to where you're at, so it should be pretty cool. My new house is gigantic. It's like 4 bedrooms. It's got like a fucking patio and it's huge. It's huge as hell, dude. You're gonna love it. Anyway, one comment from Inshoma. Systemic racism is also a divide and conquer tactic used by the rich to keep all lower class in check. And as their greed grows and grows, the white loyalists will be suffering from higher taxing as well. Good point. Good point. Sorry, dude, but I was just about to end this, so thanks for joining, man. I appreciate you watching. We need to hang out before too long, for sure. Anyway, guys, that's all I got. Thank you all. I will talk to you all later. We'll try to do a stream this Wednesday, but no guarantees. This month, the next 3 weeks are going to be really crazy for me because I'm like packing and stuff like that, and I got to get like home inspections, and I got to fucking like get things fixed and all this other baloney. So might only be streaming on Saturday, but it'll be for sure next Saturday. If we do one on Wednesday, I'll let you all know by Tuesday night. Really appreciate everybody who joined, and I will talk to you all later. Everybody, stay safe out there. Adios.